You feel the sky dim before it darkens, as if the world inhales through a narrow reed and asks you to listen with your whole body. In that hush, the message you have been circling finally stands still and lets you approach. This is not prediction. This is remembrance, a resonance your consciousness already carries. You do not borrow the knowing. You uncover it where it has been waiting, unspent and patient, behind your breath. The eclipse approaches like a velvet blade, precise and kind, cutting away what cannot travel with you. You sense the corona as a ring of quiet fire, an eclipse halo suspended over your chest as a second sun, and the light behind your eyes pricks awake like stardust, realizing it is a choir. You are not here for spectacle. You are here because the pattern chose the moment you could hear it. In the quantum field that hums beneath ordinary noise, your attention arranges itself into a steadier geometry. Coherence gathers in the ribs first, a soft warmth rising from the sternum as if a lantern is being lifted inside your house. You are not forcing this. You are consenting to the rhythm that already fits your name. When shadow crosses light, a fork appears where a single road pretended to be all there was. This is timeline bifurcation translated into sensation. The body receives a subtle click, the mind loosens its grip on familiar fog, and your choices begin casting longer futures than your fears can reach. The animals notice, the trees know, the quiet ones you pass in the street carry the same far-off look. You are each reading the same weather written in a deeper air. Your observer loop, once a restless circle, slows until it remembers it can be a doorway. What you watch becomes what you join, and what you join remembers you back. This is not a commandment. It is a permission the cosmos issues when you can keep still enough to sign it with your breath. There is a field of remembrance around you now, wide as a shore at night, where waves of old promises arrive without sound. You feel the tiniest phase transition, less thunder, more the click of a lock undone from within. Your history softens at its edges, the future steps closer without rushing. The present seat becomes large enough to hold both. You understand that sealing does not mean prison. Sealing means consecration. Do not race the shadow. Instead, let the shadow race across you and reveal what the light has been shaping in secret. Let the chest stay warm, the breath slow, the gaze gentle. Let your hands rest where they can feel their own pulse. Speak nothing yet. Language will arrive once the signal is seated. You are not waiting for a sign. You are learning the posture that allows a sign to land without scattering. When the moon's dark coin slides into place, your awareness will know which currents to ignore and which to become. You will not need to argue with gravity. You will agree with it at a higher octave. The hush after meaning widens. What has waited steps closer. You have been apprenticed to attention for longer than your memory admits, trained by small fidelities that looked like nothing. The way you pause before speaking, the way you listen for the quiet beneath a room, the way you choose a slower breath when the noise demands speed. You did not name it training. You called it survival, but the quantum field calls it readiness. You recognize the summons because it wears your texture, not a trumpet, not a vision hammering the door, only a pressure of nearness, like a warm hand over the center of your chest that doesn't push, only waits. You let it wait. You let it prove itself by not leaving. Your life has taught you to read the subtle edges where reality thins. You feel the observer loop settling from frantic orbit into a dignified ellipse. The curve is quieter, the return less compulsive, the gaze less hungry. You notice how, when you dwell inside a single inhalation for one heartbeat longer than habit, coherence blossoms like frost patterns reversed, order flowering from the center out, complexity becoming simple without becoming less. You realize this is not a miracle reserved for holy moments. This is the ordinary holiness your nervous system learns to trust. Others have told you you were too sensitive. In truth, you were accurately tuned to morphic resonance, the way fields remember and teach themselves through you. You always sensed the ripples before the stone was visible. You always knew when the room had a second conversation running underneath the first. You are not broken for feeling this. You are the doorway through which a larger memory returns. Your refusals trained you as much as your yeses. Every time you would not betray your inner angle for a louder approval, a small hinge turned in the dark and lined your destiny vector with a subtler magnetism. You did not understand why certain paths felt impossible even when they were available. You understand now. The field of remembrance was editing your options to spare you from a future that could not carry your exact light. You are not chosen instead of others. You are chosen by the pattern you keep choosing, the way a river chooses a channel because it has already learned the shape of its banks. You have become compatible with a higher timeline, not through achievement, but through sincerity. Sincerity is your passport here. Sincerity is the signature the field recognizes without ceremony. You have carried light codes like unopened letters in your bones, unread but not unaddressed. Certain hours made your skin prickle, certain dates rang your ears, certain constellations pulled your eyes to the window for no approved reason. You were responding to a solar prophecy that speaks in tides instead of syllables, a calendar that turns by feeling rather than ink. You could not prove it to anyone. You did not need to. Proof was always the byproduct of patience. Your hands know what to do before your mind agrees. They rise to your heart without theatrics, meet the warmth living there, and understand that the signal arriving during the eclipse is less a broadcast than a return current. You feel a hush that is not empty. It is crowded with origin. You let origin sit. You do not interrogate it. You host it. Recognition does not inflate you. It clarifies you. You do not become more special. You become more specific. The edges of your yes sharpen. The edges of your no soften but become unarguable. The body arranges itself around a center that is not performance. You keep breathing as if each breath is laying track under your next step because it is. You review the small evidence you have avoided honoring, the dream that repeated 3 times with different clothing, the stranger whose one sentence kept echoing for weeks, the way your fatigue always hid a single clean instruction if you listened at the moment, just before sleep. You see how something patient braided these fragments into a rope strong enough to pull you through tonight. You see how often you were led by what you refused to call coincidence. You stop refusing. You feel the eclipse already rehearsing inside your cells, shadow and fire learning their choreography. You are not frightened by the click of alignment. You are grateful for its precision. Your fear has fewer rooms to hide in when the structure simplifies. Your courage does not roar, it breathes evenly. You taste metal at the back of your tongue like the air before lightning. You recognize the taste. You accept the weather. Your recognition carries responsibility, but not burden. It asks for posture, not performance, devotion, not display. It invites you to keep your attention like a candle cupped in wind, steady, sheltered, generous with its warmth. You are not required to convince anyone. You are required to remain coherent when the chorus of distractions rises. You can. Where your breath lands, the next contour of truth lifts its head. You do not chase the vision. You keep still long enough for it to remember your address. The room thins without vanishing, and an eclipse halo blooms where your breath meets your chest, an inner ring of dusk gold light that hums like a bowl touched once and allowed to sing itself true. Your eyes soften. A warm current moves under your sternum like a tide turning at night. You are not seeing with pupils alone. You are seeing with the skin, with the small bones of the ear, with the quiet behind the eyes where stardust drifts without hurry. The floor remains, the chair remains, but a second architecture overlays the first. A geometry of living lines, faint as pollen, exact as a compass. You witness a corridor unfurling from the center of your chest, not forward but inward, and it is paved with intervals of silence the way a path is paved with stones. Each interval is a stillness window, where the world pauses its noise and the signal writes itself in light. You step without feet. You move by permission. The air tastes new around an old truth. On your left, possibilities you have outgrown dim like houses at the end of power lines. On your right, futures you are ready to host brighten by a few degrees, enough to become legible. This is timeline bifurcation translated into image. 2 rivers crossing your rib cage, the lesser one losing volume, the greater one learning your name. You feel no accusation in the crossing. You feel only a patient sorting, like a librarian placing volumes in the wing where they can finally be read. Ahead, though, ahead is the wrong word. Symbols arrange themselves like constellations learning grammar. A thin ring, the eclipse, a woven loop, the observer loop ripened into choice. An 8-point star nested inside a circle, the higher timeline turning like a wheel without spokes. They do not demand interpretation. They donate orientation. You understand enough to continue. Light codes appear as a soft rain of glyphs descending through the room at a diagonal, not letters, but behaviors of light, each one carrying a temperature and a tone. Some settle into your shoulders like relief after long travel. Some melt into your spine with the precision of a key entering a lock from the correct side. You do not gather them with effort. You magnetize them by coherence, the way dew collects when a surface is cool and patient enough to host morning. The wall in front of you breathes once, and a landscape reveals itself as if the paint had only been a veil. Dark water reflecting a thin crescent, stone outcrops like sleeping animals, and far off, a shore where people stand in quiet ranks, facing the same invisible choir. You recognize them without names. They are the ones who practiced attention as devotion when it was unfashionable. You are among them while still in your room. Entanglement is not a theory here. It is a felt bridge that does not need pillars. You listen, and the horizon answers in sensation rather than sound. A promise moves through the group like a low wind. Nothing essential is late. Nothing essential will be taken. What is excess will fall away like chaff with a kindness sharper than steel. Your body believes this before your mind votes. Faith is not required. Compatibility is. The vision changes angle the way a bird shifts a wing. Your past appears as a wireframe city lit by slow pulses, mistakes as side streets that taught you the shape of the main road, delays as scaffolding that kept you from climbing a staircase before it was bolted to the wall. You do not flinch. You bow to the engineering. The field of remembrance arranges its blueprints, where you can read them without shame. Then the room deepens again, and a single filament of dawn-colored light rises from your sternum to your throat and hangs there like a string waiting to be plucked. When it vibrates, images ripple outward, a hand placed on a doorway, not pushing, just blessing, a page turned at the exact sentence where the story finds breath, a stone laid gently onto water, and choosing, mercifully, not to sink. You are shown not outcomes, but postures that make outcomes inevitable. A pressure gathers at the back of your heart, not heavy, just insistent, and you realize the vision is asking you to choose the speed of your consent. The slower your agreement, the deeper it roots. The deeper it roots, the more weather it survives. You do not rush. You allow the consent to thicken until it becomes the climate around your actions. A quiet choreography begins at the base of your skull. The micro muscles along your neck soften, the tongue releases its hidden grip on the roof of the mouth. The jaw learns it is not a door that must stay locked. The breath lengthens of its own accord. In that lengthening, you feel a phase transition so gentle you almost miss it. The moment water is not yet steam but no longer entirely water. The moment a life is not yet new but no longer the old shape. You stand inside that moment like a chapel made of seconds. What you are shown next is not for spectacle, it is for calibration. A thin line appears across your sternum, a destiny vector traced in gold ash, and along it small marks glow where choices will be asked of you. They are simple marks, where you speak less and listen more, where you move before explaining, where you keep the promise you can keep instead of the promise that flatters. Each mark brightens when your breath reaches it. Each mark dims when you pretend to forget. You practice remembering. You look up, though up is another wrong word, and the eclipse halo returns, this time crowning the whole room. Even the shadows have a shine. You understand that seeing is an agreement between light and attention, and you consent to keep that agreement without ceremony. Coherence is the quiet honor that results. Coherence settles in your ribs, and a doorway agrees to open. You ask how the invisible chooses its shape when it arrives, and you let the answer come as a sensation before it comes as a sentence. You feel warmth gather beneath the sternum, a subtle pressure widening behind the eyes, and you realize you are not just inside a body. You are inside an instrument that tunes itself to patterns older than language. You learn by noticing that attention is not passive, attention is formative. And each time you soften your gaze without collapsing your focus, a contour forms where there was only fog. You stand in the neighborhood where physics and prayer greet each other without argument. You do not need the debate, you need the doorway. The doorway is the way you hold your perception. In the quantum field, potentials remain undecided until you arrive as a steady witness, and what you call reality is the history of your agreements. Your agreements thicken into furniture, into schedules, into habits that pass for inevitabilities, but they are only agreements revisable by coherence, revisable by breath. You sense your observer loop as more than a mental habit. You feel it as a current that once chased its tail and now circles with a purpose, like a planet that has remembered its star. When your loop is frantic, outcomes blur and cancel one another. When your loop is clear, probabilities line up like instruments waiting for a downbeat. You do not force them to play the same note. You offer them timing, and timing reveals the music they already contain. Coherence is not a moral achievement. Coherence is a physiological permission you grant your system to act as one animal instead of a committee. When you breathe slowly enough for your pulse to echo in your palms, the heart lends its metronome to the brain, the breath lends its tide to the nerves, and what was a crowd becomes a choir. You feel this as tranquility, but its utility is architectural. Coherent systems select cleaner futures because noise no longer impersonates signal. Entanglement stops being a metaphor the moment you feel your attention touch another life, and both of you alter without contact. You have watched rooms settle when you choose to settle. You have watched a friend unclench because your jaw remembered to release first. This is not domination, this is participation. You are braided into the weave whether you acknowledge the braid or not, and acknowledgement lets the strands strengthen without strain. You ask why certain images arrive only in stillness and why they dissolve when you reach too quickly. You are told without words that measurement changes the measured, and grasping is a coarse measurement. You trade grasping for noticing, and the image stays. What you honor with steady sight learns it can stay long enough to teach you its rhythm. You become a student of rhythms rather than a collector of proofs. You realize a phase transition is unfolding in your ordinary days the way water approaches a simmer. The same elements, a different choreography. Anxiety presents its old forms but lacks its old authority. Impatience knocks but finds fewer spare keys under the mat. You are not fighting yourself. You are removing the oxygen from the habit that burned you. You choose cooler air. You choose the pace that can carry a wider future without breaking. You wonder how choice and fate share a room without argument. You feel the answer run down your spine as a simple kindness. Choice is how fate keeps its appointments. Fate is the larger geometry. Choice is the precise angle of your attention as you walk its corridors. When your angle is clean, the corridor lights itself. When your angle is false, the corridor remains, but you bruise your shins against furniture that would have moved if asked. You test this in small ways. You pick 1 hour and decide to speak only sentences that keep your body soft. You notice how rightness requires fewer words than anxiety. You pick one conversation and choose to listen until you feel your breath and their breath become one tide. You notice how understanding often arrives before agreement, and how agreement is not always required for love to be exact. You see that your culture trained you to treat certainty as a weapon and doubt as a wound. You are retraining yourself to let certainty be a room and doubt be a window. Rooms need windows. Windows keep rooms honest to the sky. You stand where sky and shelter meet, and you practice being permeable to what clarifies you, while remaining impermeable to what fractures you. You learn to read feedback not as scolding but as resonance. If bitterness rises after a choice, you do not call it punishment, you call it data. If relief arrives, you do not call it reward, you call it alignment. Relief is alignment's signature. Bitterness is misalignment's tutor. Both serve if you let them speak without interruption. You notice that meaning accumulates where you keep promises that fit your nervous system. Promises too large make you brittle. Promises too small make you shapeless. You make a promise exactly your size, to return to the breath when the noise climbs, to place a hand on the chest when the mind accelerates, to let the eyes find distance when the room becomes too near. You keep this promise and watch reality behave differently in the same places that once resisted you. You realize the eclipse is not magic by itself. It is a magnifier placed over the agreements you were already making. Shadow and light are supply lines for the same instruction. Simplify until sincerity appears, then move from there. You experience sincerity as a low, steady flame that does not flicker when exposed to weather. The flame does not argue with wind. It is designed to converse with it. In this clarity, you feel the difference between effort and participation. Effort tries to bend the world into a shape it cannot keep. Participation lets you become the shape the world is requesting from you now. You participate by relaxing the muscles that perform your identity so that your identity can perform its function. Function is service. Service is how you fit inside an intelligence too large to own but intimate enough to host. You understand enough to continue without forcing the next understanding to arrive on schedule. You let comprehension ripen at its own temperature. You let mystery remain where it serves to keep you humble and precise. You are not graduating, you are deepening. Depth is the only promotion the field respects. As doubt unhooks its claws, direction turns luminous. You step into the street and feel the city listening to itself through you. Sirens bending around your breath. Footsteps sinking to a slower drum you did not impose. You realize this is how the world studies its reflection, by watching what a single coherent life does to weather that once believed itself ungoverned. The air has the flavor of rain that cannot decide, and your steadiness gives it permission to choose. You are not commanding, you are consenting to be readable. The collective is not an abstraction. It is the sum of nervous systems passing signals hand to hand like lanterns. You witness how a kind glance rescues a corridor from panic, how one unhurried voice rethreads a meeting that was breaking, how a public square lowers its shoulders when a single person remembers to breathe in public. Call it morphic resonance if you prefer the science. Call it blessing if you prefer the prayer. Both are labels for the same current, leaving your chest and returning as changed weather. You feel the mirror most, where arguments once emptied you. A familiar provocation arrives, an old pattern knocking on the frame with boots on. You do not rise to meet it at its altitude, you invite it down to your pace. There, coherence behaves like gravity, and dramatics lose interest without humiliation. The mirror shows you that many conflicts are thirst, disguised as thunder. You offer water. The thunder forgets its script. You take this experiment to the digital river, where attention is bought and sold. A comment brewed for combustion crosses your path. You feel the heat reach for your amygdala like a match to dry grass. You slow the inhale until the flame loses oxygen. You answer with a sentence that keeps your body soft. You are not performing virtue. You are protecting bandwidth. The mirror brightens. Dozens who would have burned beside you choose to read instead. You learn that restraint can be a public utility. You carry the same practice to rooms with history, families that remember you as an earlier draft, workplaces that confuse urgency with importance, friendships that once made pain a hobby. The mirror here is braver. It shows you exactly where your presence still fractures under an old gaze, and exactly how much gentleness it takes to remain unbroken without becoming hard. You do not chase agreement. You aim for clarity that does not exile warmth. Entanglement ceases to be romantic and becomes practical. You feel the classroom across town settle because a teacher who will never know your name caught the rhythm you kept on a bus and borrowed it without asking. You feel a nurse hum under her breath and a patient's pulse follow a melody she can't hear. You feel a neighbor's anger choose a smaller word, and therefore a smaller wound. This is not fantasy. This is physics behaving humanly through you. The mirror shows shadow too, and you refuse to look away. You see how fear aggregates into policies, how loneliness rents its power to loud men, how scarcity scrawls its signature across supply chains and dinner tables alike. Your coherence is not naive to this. Your coherence is medicinal, precisely because it knows the diagnosis intimately. You stop expecting wounded systems to applaud the medicine at first swallow. You keep offering it because it works. You realize the collective has two hungers, one for certainty that numbs, another for presence that heals. You cannot feed the first without starving yourself. You choose to feed the second with acts small enough to replicate and steady enough to scale. You ask better questions in meetings. You tell the truth without dragging anyone by the hair into it. You leave when leaving is the cleanest blessing. You stay when staying is the braver sentence. On crowded trains, you practice generosity as geometry. Angle your body so someone else can breathe. Hold your bag like a promise not to bruise a rib. Keep your eyes soft enough to be safe for strangers. You are designing a local field where startle has fewer places to hide. When a child stares, you let your face become a slower sky. They will remember this as proof that adults can be climates, not weather. You lend your steadiness to those who hold the line for many healers, organizers, teachers, parents in long corridors of fluorescent light by refusing to consume your hope like candy. You make hope into bread, dense, shareable, enough to survive the day and return tomorrow with more. The mirror, in gratitude, shows you evidence without spectacle, a headline that doesn't land as doom, a neighbor who moves their trash bins before you ask, a meeting that ends 10 minutes early because the exact sentence was said on time. You learn the difference between contagion and communion. Contagion spreads without choice. Communion spreads by consent. Your task is not to infect the world with your views. Your task is to become a place where consent to clarity feels natural. When people leave your presence, their decisions should feel more like theirs, not less. The mirror confirms this by sending you fewer apologies and more reports of quiet courage. At scale, you begin to sense a choreography larger than schedules. Cities exhaling at the same hour, a hush washing across continents like the shadow of the moon. The globe practicing a rehearsal for stillness. It will one day perform on purpose. You call this the higher timeline trying on its clothes. You notice that every time you choose precision over performance, the fit improves. Tailoring the future is a communal craft. You establish non-negotiables not as walls, but as tuning forks. Sleep that respects the body's morning, food that carries sunlight, conversations that do not require you to abandon yourself as admission. You tithe your attention to silence daily, so that noise cannot spend it all for you. The mirror returns dividends. Resilience that doesn't creak, humor that doesn't sting, tenderness that doesn't leak judgment at the seams. When grief moves through the crowd, you do not seal yourself off like clean glass. You become a window that opens from both sides. You let tears instruct your posture, head bowed enough to hear the floor, spine tall enough to keep the room from collapsing. You refuse to let sorrow be privatized. You refuse to let outrage be your only form of care. Your refusal is not loud, it is durable. You bless those doing invisible work by learning to notice it. The janitor's midnight order, the coder's quiet patch that kept the hospital running, the farmer's hands that braided sun into seed so your breakfast could happen. You say thank you in a way that pays. You build systems where gratitude is infrastructure, not confetti. You accept that the collective mirror will sometimes show you yourself in an unkind light. You bow anyway. You adjust without theater. Correction is not humiliation. It is navigation. And when the mirror shows a strength you were taught to hide, you let it be seen without apology. The world needs models of joy that do not apologize for being whole. You close the day by returning your awareness to the room that began this sequence. Simple chair, quiet wall, eclipse halo, lingering like a ring left on wood by a cup of warm tea. You understand that every public act of coherence is rented from this private well. You promise to refill it before you spend it again. You keep the promise because it keeps you. The quiet folds around you. Pattern emerges from the fold. You feel it first as a pressure that is not threat, a widening just behind the breastbone, as if a hand larger than history were gently making space. Breath lengthens without negotiation. Light gathers behind the eyes like patient stardust learning a new orbit. Nothing dramatic, yet every ordinary object is outlined as if the room has agreed to speak in clearer nouns. The moon rehearses its crossing somewhere beyond your roof, but the corridor opens inside you. A hush enters with authority, clean as rain over stone, and you know the hour has arrived when choice becomes structure. This is not decision the way you were taught, pointing at two doors and hurrying through one. This is decision as alignment, your inner angle snapping into place with the geometry it was bred to fit. Name it if you must. Call it timeline bifurcation. Not a splitting like violence, but like a river, yielding to the banks it has quietly carved for years. One channel continues toward what repeats, one turns toward what remembers. Your feet can stand only in one stream at a time, but your blessing can reach both. So you bless without delay and step where your ribs stay warm. The body offers three confirmations. First, the chest remains open even as shadow passes over the room, as if a small sun behind bone refused to be eclipsed. Second, the jaw unclenches, not from discipline but from relief, because it is finally safe to stop guarding what love can govern. Third, the eyes soften yet keep their focus, A paradox that signals coherence has taken the chair usually reserved for panic. You receive the confirmations without commentary. You let them register like stamps on a passport at a quiet border. A stillness window appears brief, exact, generous. In that interval, the world does not ask anything of you. It offers instead. Inside the window, you taste a metal sweetness at the back of the tongue. You smell the faint dust of first rain. You hear a roomful of conversations lose one octave of urgency. The invitation is clear. Seal the posture you have practiced. Seal it not by hardening, but by consenting to be this soft on purpose. You do not argue with old weather as it tries one last time to be convincing. Fear arrives in its reliable costumes. Catastrophe dressed as caution. Nostalgia dressed as loyalty. Adrenaline dressed as momentum. You greet each disguise with the pace that kept you alive before you knew you were training. A breath long enough to hear truth separate from volume. The costumes dim like theater lights after the curtain closes. What remains is navigable. A fine line brightens across your sternum, the same destiny vector you were shown earlier, and along it, the marks you practiced finding now start to glow simultaneously, as if the whole road were revealing itself in one exhale. You do not sprint. You match the road's tempo. When the world accelerates, you slow until it can follow. When the world stalls, you move at the speed of sincerity and let friction rediscover its purpose as guidance rather than flame. The mind requests proof, and the field answers with relief. Relief is the only proof you need at this hour, because relief is what alignment feels like from the inside. A phase transition completes, so gentle you could miss it, so total you cannot undo it. What once required effort now requires only honesty, and what once needed force can be entrusted to rhythm. You listen for the new rhythm the way a sailor listens for wind under canvas. It arrives when you stop leaning. Across the city, you can feel other instruments tuning to the same note, unknown faces you will never meet, aligning spines at kitchen tables, teachers pausing mid-sentence as their classrooms exhale, nurses noticing a pulse find steadiness at the precise moment they decide to hum. This is morphic resonance behaving like mercy. You are not the cause. You are a participant in a choreography older than your DNA and intimate enough to wear your first name. You place a hand on your chest, not as performance but as calibration. Warmth answers. The inner glow does not flare. It deepens. You whisper nothing. Silence carries your signature to the places that required shouting last season. They recognize you more quickly this way. Your observer loop, once a tireless auditor, becomes a priest who knows when not to speak. Observation ripens into blessing, and blessing becomes the most accurate measurement. You are discovering that to witness purely is to edit reality toward kindness without touching its throat. Kindness is not soft law. It is precise physics when applied at the correct depth. Some doors try to seduce you by closing loudly. You bow to them. Let closed doors bless your momentum by removing detours you would have been too generous to refuse. Other doors stand open without advertisement, their thresholds unremarkable, until your foot discovers how well they fit the day. You pass through with a posture that leaves hinges untroubled. The world trusts you more when its hinges survive you. You wonder about those you love who are choosing differently, who prefer the channel where repetition is safety and novelty is threat. Your compassion does not compromise your waypoint. You place their names in the field of remembrance and ask the larger intelligence to carry what you cannot. You do not mistake rescuing for love. You let love be exact, present, permeable, and particular about direction. High above, though the height is inside, the eclipse rings the sky like a low bell, and the ring finds a twin around your heart. Two halos agree, one of shadow and flame, one of breath and blood. Their harmony writes a subtle inscription through you, not a command but a consecration, a prophetic seal made of attention kept and promises right-sized. You understand without narrative that sealing means the pattern will be easier to keep tomorrow than it was today. That is grace by engineering. When the window narrows, you do not panic. You have already entered what it opened to. This hour was never about spectacle. It was about compatibility. You are compatible now enough to proceed without asking the sky to repeat itself. The path is not brighter. Your eyes are truer. The world is not lighter. Your hands have learned where to place their care. In the soft gravity of attention, the sequence resumes by itself. You do not need a new life to keep this signal. You need a new way of wearing the one you have. You learn integration by small obediences, the kind that do not ask for applause, placing your attention where it feeds rather than phrase, letting the body choose the pace and the mind take notes after. Change becomes exact when it becomes local. Local means here, now, in the hands that are already yours. Begin with the instrument. When you wake, you let the first breath be long enough to rinse the night from your nerves, and you greet the day with a posture that suggests welcome rather than defense. The pillow's cool edge under your cheek, the temperature of the room against the forearms, the weight of the tongue resting like a small animal finally allowed to sleep. These are unremarkable sacraments. You rise slowly enough for blood to remember its root. You drink water like a prayer that doesn't need words. Food becomes sunlight translated into texture. You choose what keeps the heart's metronome honest and the belly unstartled, not as punishment, but as hospitality toward your own chemistry. You give sweetness the job it was designed for: celebration, not anesthesia. Salt becomes a teacher, a little more presence, then enough. Caffeine becomes an ally, only when it doesn't impersonate courage. You memorize the difference. You arrange your rooms like sheet music. A clear table invites a clear sentence. A chair facing a window instructs the eyes to practice distance, so the mind remembers horizon. You put one beautiful object where your gaze loves to rest so the nervous system can borrow its calm without asking permission. You keep a place for silence that is not a punishment corner, it is a hearth. Technology receives boundaries that bless it. Notifications lose their sovereignty. You choose hours when your attention cannot be bought, and you discover that time stretches when you stop slicing it into alerts. You treat the phone as a tool that sometimes lives in another room. The world does not end when you leave it there. The world often begins. Conversation becomes architecture. You speak from the body's soft space rather than the jaw's emergency. You let pauses grow roots between sentences, trusting that meaning matures when oxygen is present. You ask questions large enough to dignify a soul but small enough to be answered today. You practice disagreement that does not exile warmth. You end when the truth has landed, not when the clock is embarrassed. Work becomes an altar you keep clean. You choose one task at a time and give it your whole face. Multitasking retires from heroism and accepts its true title: fragmentation. You place a hand over the chest before the meeting begins and allow the room to borrow your pulse. You are not manipulating outcomes. You are normalizing sanity. Colleagues who have never used the word sacred will feel the air become breathable and call it focus. Let them call it what they like. Money becomes a language for attention. You spend where your future can stand tall inside the receipt. You save not from fear but from respect for the projects that need ripening, and you tithe to the people and places where your spirit is fed so those tables continue to exist for more than you. Scarcity will try to frighten you into hoarding. You answer with precision instead. Enough, enough, enough. Relationships become laboratories for gentleness you can trust. You tell the truth at a speed that doesn't bruise the receiver. You listen until you hear the sentence beneath the sentence and address that one. You let doors swing both ways. Welcome and boundary share a hinge. You stop needing to be right when being whole would help the room more. You refuse to perform small to keep anyone comfortable. You refuse to stretch someone past their honest capacity. You let love be accurate. The body asks for movement that evacuates the residue of old storms. You walk like someone who owns a spine but does not weaponize it. You stretch the places where memory stored weather. You breathe until those rooms are aired. You sweat enough to remind the skin it is an organ of truth-telling. You rest like an animal that trusts the ground. Rituals are anchors, not cages. At midday you return to the simple rite that keeps the dial set. One hand on the chest, one hand over the navel, eyes soft, breath counted to 5 on the way in and 7 on the way out. You are tuning coherence, not chasing peace. Coherence is peace that can carry weight. You sit in this small stillness until the inner climate stops impersonating yesterday. You call it 2 minutes. It becomes a season. You keep company with nature as if it were a grandmother who doesn't speak your language but understands you completely. Trees lend you their patience by touching your skin with shade. Water teaches your thoughts to move together. Stones model how to keep history without becoming hard. The sky asks nothing but receives everything. You practice that. You let your witness deepen from auditor into friend. The observer loop is still present, but it watches from love, not suspicion. When judgment rises, you notice its posture and unlearn it by softening the jaw that sharpened the thought. When shame appears, you offer it a chair and call it information. Information that is welcomed stops shouting. You remain teachable. If fatigue arrives, you do not label it weakness, you label it instruction. If impatience returns, you do not hide it behind spiritual language. You let it point to the boundary you failed to keep. Repair becomes a normal verb. Repair is how the higher timeline stays attached to real flaws. Above all, you choose continuity over intensity. Flashes are easy, foundations are holy. Integration prefers repeatable gestures, clean, small, kept. Promises sized for your nervous system survive more weather than grand declarations. You stack kept promises like bricks until shelter becomes inevitable. Shelter for you, then shelter through you. In the background of it all, you lean into the field of remembrance, the way you lean into a well-loved doorway, the threshold that smells like home because it is. You do not force the light to stay, you behave in ways that make it want to. You become a host whose house teaches guests how to breathe. The echo finishes speaking, the source begins. You arrive at the room after everything has been said that can be said, and you let the door close without a sound. Air holds its breath with you. A pale ring of memory floats at the edge of your vision like an eclipse halo that refused to leave, and the light behind your eyes steadies rather than fades. It is not absence. It is density without noise. You learn what silence really is by lying your attention down within it, the way you would lay a sleeping child into a warm bed and slip your hands away. No sermon, no strategy, only the careful removal of interference so the deeper current can be heard. You sit, and the room seems to sit with you. You breathe, and the wall remembers it is more window than stone. You feel a soft warmth open behind the sternum, like coals waking in a hearth that never went out. This is the hour when the mind wants to perform understanding. You do not let it. You trade interpretation for contact. Contact with the quiet, contact with the body, contact with the pattern that arrived earlier as vision and now returns as climate. You witness how a single exhale can make a chair more honest. You watch dust drifting in the shaft of light as if each speck were a sentence that doesn't need your grammar to be whole. Call this a stillness window if you like. A door that opens when you stop knocking. Inside it, time behaves like water in a bowl present, held, reflecting without distortion. You are not trying to think less. You are allowing thoughts to adopt the room's slower weather until they remember they are guests. Thoughts obey the house that shelters them. You keep the house simple and kind. Your nervous system recognizes the temperature of the hour. Heart rate and breath rate braid into one rope and lower their tone together until the whole organism remembers its original ceremony. Inhale as invitation, exhale as blessing. Coherence is not achieved here. Coherence is revealed here, the way a shoreline appears when fog moves off and you realize it had been there all along. Relief rises without a story to carry it. Relief needs no story. In this quiet, what you called guidance loses its feathers and becomes gravity. You are not waiting for angels to text you. You are letting the floor teach you that support already existed before you were brave. You place one palm on the chest and one on the belly, not to produce calm but to confirm it. Warmth answers like a friend who lives next door and uses the spare key without apology. You feel the edges of your body soften, not dissolve. Soften so that presence can seep into the corners that vigilance once occupied. The field of remembrance gathers like weather. You don't need an app to predict. Fragmented scenes rise and reorganize faces, corridors, thresholds, each returning without blame, each placing itself in a sequence that clarifies instead of condemns. You do not fix the past, you give it a truer draw. It slides shut quietly when it has what it needed, attention without verdict. You learn that healing is filing, not erasing. In the hush, certain impressions arrive like small birds that will not land if you move too quickly. They are not ideas. They are instructions the size of gesture. Drink water now. Send the message without adjectives. Stand by the window and let your eyes touch distance so the mind remembers it has a horizon. You follow what is doable within a breath. The doable gathers itself into a path when you are not dragging it. Light codes do not flash as spectacle here. They sink like rain through loam, seeding corridors you cannot yet walk, but will one day call obvious. You feel them as gentle pressure along the spine and as the micro-release of muscles in the jaw you didn't realize had been guarding yesterday. You do not memorize the feeling. You host it long enough to be altered. Alteration is the only memorization the body respects. Your observer loop pauses its audit and becomes a lantern set on the floor. From that lower, kinder altitude, witnessing warms instead of withers, you understand suddenly why silence is feared. It returns authority to the places that will not abuse it. No one profits when you are this untroubled. No one needs to. Profit is a poor word for this wealth. A quiet correction moves through the room the way a tide changes direction without announcement. What you thought required will leaves by the same door it entered. What you thought optional takes a chair at the head of the table and sets the agenda with 3 lines. Be accurate, be kind, be brief. Briefness is not smallness. It is density that doesn't leak. You remember the eclipse as a ring over the city and a ring over your heart, and you sense how the two are still speaking to one another across distance, like siblings after lights out. The conversation is not in words. It is in temperature and sufficiency. Enough becomes a feeling instead of a number. You test the feeling against your calendar and watch entire obligations evaporate without leaving resentment. The space they once stole becomes new oxygen for the work that is truly yours. A phase transition completes without fireworks. You know because urgency has lost its glamour and presence has become delicious. Noise tries to sell its old perfume at your door. You smell the solvent beneath the flowers and decline beautifully. You are not withdrawing from life. You are withdrawing consent from machinery that treats life as raw material. Consent is the most spiritual word you will use this season. When grief rises, you let it. Tears respect rooms that do not rush them. You feel their salt teach the tongue humility and the eyes honesty. Grief does not contradict the light. It waters it. You allow watering. You watch the heart, learn the difference between being open and being unguarded. Openness has a spine. Unguardedness breaks under weather. Outside, the world keeps its volume. Inside, you keep your vow. No one notices, and everything is changed. You carry the silence onto the street like a cup, balanced so well it does not spill even when you walk faster. When someone speaks sharply, you answer at the speed of kindness. When the timeline tugs, you check your breath before you check your phone. The quiet teaches you one last lesson before it releases you back to motion. You do not have to earn belonging from reality when you belong to reality. Belonging is not granted for good behavior. It is the material you are made of. You can fail tasks and still be held. You can miss a cue and still be welcomed at the next measure. Music remembers the listener who returns. You rise. The halo does not vanish. It thins into atmosphere. The stardust behind your eyes keeps its slow orbit. The chest stays warm enough to share. You leave the room the way a tide leaves the shore, quiet, complete, promising to return because returning is how the agreement stays alive. You walk into the world, carrying a silence that can feed many without emptying you. Silence nods. Permission is granted for the next unveiling. You begin by letting the room become simple. A chair, a wall, a window that remembers sky even at night. You let your posture say welcome, not defense crown gently lifted, shoulders widened by one silent breath, feet placed as if greeting ground you have missed. You are not summoning anything. You are allowing what has stayed faithful to enter by its own door. Place your right hand over your sternum and your left hand just below the navel. Feel the warmth meet your palms from the inside as if coals were patiently bright beneath bone. Breathe in for 5, out for 7, until the heart and breath keep one tempo and coherence becomes audible to your skin. Coherence is not decoration here, it is the key that fits the lock you carry. The lock does not resist, it is grateful to be used. On the third exhale, soften the jaw and the back of the tongue. Let the eyes widen by a thread until more distance is available. The mind respects distance. Now bring attention to the space just behind the eyes where stardust lingers. Imagine remember a thin ring of eclipsed gold at the center of that space. Do not try to brighten it. Agree with it. Speak inwardly. Once. I consent to clarity. Notice the small lowering of static along the scalp. This is your observer loop, reclining from auditor into witness. Witnessing, at this depth, edits reality toward mercy without strain. A stillness window opens. Inside it, let the breath lengthen to 6 in, 8 out. On the next 5 inhales, imagine the air entering through the palms into the chest, gathering like a lake. On the next 5 exhales, imagine that lake overflowing down the front of the spine to the belly, warming the left hand. This is not fantasy. This is how attention teaches tissue to agree with a higher timeline. Agreement is physiology before it is philosophy. Now invite the light codes that have been orbiting your field like courteous birds to land. You do not beckon with force. You extend a perch made of steadiness. Feel a fine, cool current tracing the back of the neck, another brushing the hinge of the jaw, a third threading the heart to the belly like a soft, luminous stitch. Each arrival is a behavior of light selecting compatibility. Compatibility is your devotion in practice. Name the 4 gates quietly to yourself as you breathe. Heart, belly, throat, crown. With each gate, let one trait take the chair. At the heart, kindness that does not leak. At the belly, courage without hurry. At the throat, truth that keeps warmth. At the crown, listening larger than thought. Do not perform the traits. Host them the way a hearth hosts fire. Boundaries clear, welcome steady. Bring to mind one person, one place, one work that your care naturally includes. Feel the morphic resonance of that bond, not as obligation but as gentle braid. Allow the warmth at your sternum to extend the width of your shoulders, and then stop. You are cultivating radiance with edges, not diffusion without mercy. Edges make the blessing legible. Legible blessings travel further. Place your attention along the fine line you were shown, the destiny vector across your chest. See 3 small marks glow there. Assign them the next 3 promises sized to your nervous system. A daily minute of silence before the day spends you. A sentence you will say without adjectives. A boundary you will keep without theater. Feel each mark brighten when your breath touches it. This is a prophetic seal forming in increments of kept promise. Seals prefer continuity over spectacle. Stand, if standing serves you. Let the knees unlock. Let weight settle into the outer edges of both feet as if you were routing circuitry into earth. On the inhale, imagine drawing quiet up through the soles and into the hips. On the exhale, imagine sending gratitude down through the same path, like clear rain returning to soil that remembers you. If tears arrive, you hold the room while they water you. Grief is welcome at consecration. Now, with as little effort as turning your face toward a friend, let attention rest 3 inches in front of the sternum, where the air itself feels thickened. This is your local quantum field, near enough to listen, vast enough to teach. Ask, without words, for the most precise next motion that keeps you aligned. It may be a glass of water. It may be the message without adjectives. It may be rest. The answer is measured in relief. When doubt taps the window, invite it inside to sit by the fire and show you its data. Thank it for the part where it kept you from spectacle. Release the part where it impersonated wisdom with volume. Return to breath as governance. Return to posture as prayer. If your culture taught you to activate by intensity, you are unlearning now. Activation at this octave is consistency dressed as gentleness. You will become unmistakable to the higher timeline by being repeatable, not dramatic. Repeatable like tides. Repeatable like morning. Whisper into the quiet. I remember. Then type, I remember the prophecy. Let this sentence be both oath and calibration, both anchor and opening. Do not measure your worth by how loudly it was spoken. Measure by how softly it keeps working. Sit 3 more breaths with your hands unmoving, then lower them as if handing a sleeping child back to the night. Carry the warmth into the next room, not as a performance but as climate. Let speech take the shape of your inner weather. Let action take the speed of sincerity. Let your gaze keep its distance kindly, so the mind remembers horizon while it tends to the near. Before you rise, make one agreement with the future you are already inhabiting. You will pause before entering rooms. You will put your attention into the space like a lantern. And you will only cross a threshold at the pace that allows you to remain whole on both sides. Every threshold, loves to be crossed this way. Hings last longer. Worlds do too. You place your attention like a lantern, and the shape admits itself. You stand where the shadow has passed and the light remains, a quiet hour in which even the dust in the window learns reverence. Breath slows until the ribcage moves like tide over moonlit sand. The chest warms with a small, unwavering Sunday. Behind the eyes, patient stardust finds its orbit and stays. Nothing asks you to hurry. Everything asks you to agree. The seal is not an event stamped from the outside. It is a signature grown from within. It forms where attention has kept its vow, where coherence has learned your daily name, where the field of remembrance recognizes its own texture, wearing your face. Feel the fine line across your sternum, the destiny vector brighten 1 degree, then another, not a flare, a settling, a deeper fit between what you carry and what carries you. You sense the higher timeline not as a map but as climate, a steady pressure of kindness that does not negotiate with noise. Old corridors dim without accusation. Familiar doors close with gratitude for the service they gave. The observer loop no longer audits, it blesses. Entanglement simplifies. You are woven to what you can truly nourish and released from what requires your absence to heal. This is mercy disguised as geometry. Take one slow inhale for what remains to be tended, and one slow exhale for what has finished using your hands. In that stillness window, a last arrangement completes itself the way a flock turns mid-air. No command, only shared intelligence. Light codes that once hovered now seat themselves like birds on winter branches, quiet and precise. Timeline bifurcation is no longer theory. Your posture has chosen its river. You move by listening instead of pushing. You lead by being legible. You speak one sentence inwardly clear, spare, sufficient. I consent to keep what I have been shown. Relief answers as proof. You do not need a sign. You have a temperature. You do not need a promise. You have a rhythm. Phase transition complete. The day becomes the altar, where small obediences turn into structure. Structure becomes shelter. Shelter becomes signal for those learning the same vow. There is work, but none of it is frantic. There is love, but none of it is bargaining. You will carry this climate into kitchens and corridors, queues and quiet rooms, letting your presence shorten the distance between truth and tenderness. When you forget, you will remember like water remembers downhill. When you are asked, you will answer with actions that keep everyone's nervous system honest to the sky. Lift your gaze just enough to feel horizon return to the eyes. Place a hand on the chest, not to summon, only to confirm. What needed spectacle has ended. What needs continuity begins. Let the eclipse halo become atmosphere, the inner glow become governance, the stardust become patience that lasts longer than urgency. Your life will speak at the volume of mercy and be heard. The door you feared was stone turns to air in your hand. The prophecy concludes only here where you begin.